What is up, guys? And finally, welcome back to the Hand Tight Racing YouTube channel. We make our long-awaited return to YouTube. Some of you know, some of you may not know that we've just been super busy building the Dark Horse, or AKA my new comp car slash party car, also for Pro-Am next season. Before we get this video started, I just want to say we do have a new team shirt out. I think it came out pretty rad. I think Hidden Skins did a very good job with the design and the print. I want to thank La Familia Pawn and Jewelry, Lithia Springs Ford, Ortiz Performance, BC Racing, Zach Nova US, and WiseFab for sticking with me through this whole thing. And that's the front. And I'd really appreciate if you guys would head on over to the Hand Tight Racing website and order one of these so that we can get rid of them. We only got 144 of them, so get them while they last. Now we'll just jump right into it. We just tested this car this past weekend at a Holly Ford Fest, and it did pretty good. We haven't tested it in the dry because it was raining all weekend due to Hurricane Helene. So that was a challenge, but we got it ready. The car's not 100% perfect. We weren't able to make our wheels fit in time. We're doing 18s. These are 19s. Shout out to Josh for giving me those and letting me get on track with this thing. But as you can see here, our bumper doesn't fit quite right. We're missing a support up top, so it's all zip tied up just to make the event. We only got one headlight in. We did our hood pin thing. But overall, it's in much better condition than it was when we got it. So I'm happy with that, and it's at least drivable now. This car is pretty much a spitting image of Tyler's car and my previous S650. It's got the same roll cage, the same seat. It's pretty much built identical with a few minor exceptions. The dash is really sick. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I got the car, because imagine getting in somebody's like Pro-Am level car with a full roll cage and seeing this massive display. I got so many compliments on it at Ford Fest, despite the lack of spectators that were there. But overall, it did good. What we're going to go through in this video is about the amount of work that it took to get to this stage, and everything we did along the way. We'll just go through that in depth, and hopefully you can see or kind of relate to why we haven't been filming YouTube videos as much lately. So this is a 2024 Ford Mustang Dark Horse with 1,056.6 miles on it. I don't know how the guy crashed it, but we picked this thing up from Copart on a pretty good deal. After all things considered, we'll get to that at the end. That's a long story, and I know a lot of people ask me about that because it was publicly posted for a little while and it no longer is. So we'll get into that. I'm gonna go through some of the things that we had to do to this car, and I'll drop pictures and videos in between this this segment in picture so that you guys can kind of get a rough idea of what all had to get done. First and foremost, the biggest obstacle to overcome, which we knew when we bought the car, that this front right section here was going to need to be replaced completely, basically almost from the firewall forward. What that meant was we were going to have to immediately drop the engine. That was our first order of business, was to get the engine out of the car and get this thing prepped to get that front right frame rail cut, and then start putting the new one on. You can see we do not have a lift in this garage, and we don't even have high enough ceilings to put a lift in this garage. We wanted to do it on a lift. Yes, I know it doesn't need to be done on a lift, but we needed to get this thing on a lift just so that we could go through and inspect just exactly how much damage this car had and what kind of repairs it was going to need, because pretty much all this stuff can be repaired if you know how to do it, or the right people that can help you to do it. So fortunately, one of my buddies that lives right down the street, he does have a lift, and he's really busy on it, obviously, or he wouldn't have it. So we worked something out to where he would let me use it free of cost for the stipulation added in that we would have the engine out and this thing be a roller in right around 6 to 8 hours. So, I mean, we've done it before, so we took that and we got it on the lift. So, we got it down to the lift, and we already knew that what needed to be done was we needed to drop the subframe, get a cherry picker, put the engine on the cherry picker after we separated the transmission because we dropped that with it. And then once we did that, we were able to put the subframe back in, install the front suspension enough to make it a roller and a steer. So because we had to get it back down here, and it's close enough to where I don't have to put a trailer on it or put it on a trailer. Got it back down here, backed it in the garage, got it way up in the air on jack stands, and then we had a good buddy of mine come over, and he was going to oversee the entire operation of cutting off the frame rail and applying the new one. In the meantime, I ordered a front right frame rail from a crash in the rear end 2024 Mustang. I don't know if it was a GT. I think it was a GT, but they had that cut off, and I was able to get it shipped to me. My buddy came over and told me where I needed to cut this thing in order to make this work. So after that, we decided that we were going to cut it off, and we did just that. So it was sitting in my garage for about a week after we cut it off, and the front right section took about 2-ish weeks, maybe a little less, to arrive via freight from California. It got here, and it was pretty much time to put it on the car. So repairing this frame rail correctly, it requires a bunch of math that I don't really do yet because I'm not a body guy. Like I said, I'm more into mechanicals and suspension and stuff like that, and a little bit of fabrication here and there, but nothing serious like this. So Dave, a good buddy of mine that's been doing paint body work for around 40 years, came over. He's actually my rear neighbor also, but that's irrelevant. He came over, and we basically had to cut it in sections on the frame rail that made it mesh into the car's unibody. So you can't just cut it straight on the other side, join it together, weld the seams. That's not a correct repair. If you know or you don't know, most unibody cars are layered, so it's not just one piece of solid steel. It is a joint of, maybe 3, 4, I don't know, maybe even sometimes 5 different layers. So you just had to cut it in a certain way. It's a lot of wheel work, and by that I mean cut off wheels. So you have to cut it in very specific spots, make it mesh into the car's original unibody, and then you have to measure it from the OEM CAD drawings, which I'm thankful that Ford actually provided to me when I told them about this project. So we measured it all. It all came out great. Made sure the car was level when we put it on the jack stands. Made sure the frame rails were level with each other. Made sure our distances were within tolerance, because not all of these cars are built to the same exact spec. And that's not by design. It's a lot of metal work, so they can differ, up to 3 millimeters. So we were all in tolerance, somewhere around 2 millimeters, and then we started to do the welding process to make the car's unibody straight and full again. So we did that, and then it was basically time to put the car's main engine harness back in, which I'm really happy that, Lithia Springs Ford helped me out with that. They got me all the parts that I needed, and they worked with me through months, because there's no way I could have known every single little piece that I needed to make this work. So I'm really fortunate for their patience and working with me. They got me the harness that I needed, or both harnesses that we knew we needed, and then it was basically time to put the engine back in after we wired the entire car, and try to get this thing running, which required a Ford technician with FDRS, or if I would have had FDRS, maybe we could have done it, maybe we couldn't. I don't know. I don't engine really harness connected, or the main 2 engine harnesses connected, because they pigtail off each other. We got those connected, and we got most everything we needed to have this car programmed plugged in. So we called our Ford tech buddy out here. Shout out to Daniel for that. He came out. We had a spare key from Lithia Springs Ford. We had power. We had everything. And surprisingly, after the programming, which took somewhere in the ballpark of around 30 minutes, the car fired right up with pretty much no issues. I mean, we didn't have the radiator connected. The transmission cooler wasn't connected, so it was kind of spewing a little bit of transmission fluid. Um, but all in all, it was a success because we had power, we had a running engine, and that was a win for us. Let me tell you, when I say I'm making it sound really light, but routing this engine harness and routing the harness that runs around the bell housing of the transmission was really not a fun task. We didn't have the O2 sensors plugged in because we couldn't figure out which way the harness went. So the downstreams were unplugged. And if you flipped it one way, it would work. If you flipped it the other way, it would also work. So it was just super confusing. And we had a running car though, so we were happy with it. We're like, okay, this thing works because we hadn't tested it up to this point. We'll send Ford Tech home, and then we will button this up, and we'll have them come back to do the misfire monitor countdown. So we got all that buttoned up, and then we had Daniel come out again, the Ford Tech, and do the rest of the programming, the misfire monitor countdown. And the car still did good. This is after we got like the radiator, the oil cooler, the transmission cooler, and all that stuff plugged back in. So we were ready. We needed to get it to operating temp to do that. You can't do that while it's cold or not at operating temp. So it had to be pretty much ready to idle for a long time to do that. It probably took another hour or so. We got all that done, and then it was basically waiting on our suspension and just getting this thing turned back into a roller, which we took a while to do. We were just procrastinating and, just kind of burnt out. But Ford Fest was the following week, and we just nutted up and we just did it. So we ended up making it to Ford Fest, and we just tested this car. We'll drop some footage at the end of this video on that, so you can guys kind of see how it did and whatnot. Auction day came. This lot was listed as run and drive. It's still got its Copart numbers on it. That's funny. We bid on the car, ran it up to $23,200. We ended up winning the bid. I was not in Orlando at the time of delivery. And when I got back, I was shocked to see that there was no PCM and the wire harness was cut like I was telling you earlier. Well, that was a big problem for me because there's no way this car was running and driving without a PCM and the wiring harness in the condition that it was in. I didn't really know what to do because everybody was like, oh, well, you're not getting anything back from Copart. And even Copart told me that at one point, but I'm pretty persistent. And we had a pretty decent presence on social media. So thanks to all you guys on Instagram, especially for making a big deal about it, because it was a big deal. They labeled this lot as running and driving. You can see from the pictures that I'll show below that this was in fact not a running and driving car, and they knew that when they sold it. This car was purchased in Orlando originally for $18,000 from that Copart, transferred up to the Newburgh location, and where it was sold by the dealer that bought it as running and driving. They kind of like prettied up the pictures. They basically polished the turd. So I made a big deal about it on Instagram. And I was also in direct contact with the general manager of that location. And they ended up giving me some money back, enough to cover the PCM, the harness, and they don't know this, but it covered because we got the parts so cheap and had help from so many people that it covered basically the frame rail expense, the wiring harness, the PCM, and the programming. So they made it right in my eyes, and I felt like I got the car for what it was worth in the condition that it was in when it arrived here. So all in all, they made it right. Could have been a lot worse. I could have had to fork that out of pocket, which would have really sucked. But I didn't. And now we have a beautiful piece of machinery that me and the rest of the guys at Hand Tire Racing have built. and it's going to be a weapon. It's not 100% right now, but it will be in the very not so distant future. I really enjoy this car already, even though I've only taken it out for around a dozen laps in the rain. But I mean, just the aura that it gives off is enough to make me happy. So we got Wisefab front on this car. Then we went with the same cage, sawbelt seat, uh, Motegi battles, same Willwood setup in the rear. We kept our front Brembos, sold our rear Brembos, basically swapped all the rear to S550 suspension and brakes. S550 rear lower control arms, still the same S650 subframe. Um, and then pretty much stock other than that. I mean, the exhaust is off right now. Well, from like the transmission back, I think it's the axle back. I don't know. I'm getting into that stuff, but that's gone. So no mufflers. It's still catted and it's not loud at all, which is gonna have to change. I don't like Tyler's car being louder than mine in videos or on the track. Loud cars, I feel like, will allow you to hear what the car is doing while you're on track with your helmet on and a loud car next to you. If you're on someone's car who is, loud, it's a lot easier to hear what your car is doing and where it's at in the power band. So I really think that's an advantage as a driver, to be able to hear your car. So the next thing for this is to get it all buttoned up and hopefully get it ready for V2 labs. And I'll keep this short and sweet. We'll just drop some videos of how the car did at Ford Fest and a couple videos from that trip. That'll be it for this one. Until next time.